I think we have everything set up the way that we want. Oh, look at that. We are actually a couple of minutes early tonight for tonight's stream. If you are already viewing, then welcome. This is going to be one of those nights where perhaps we only go for an hour, hour and a half, depending on how things turn out during the stream. I do have some ideas for things that I want to do, and we'll see where that list takes us. But I do have a little bit of prep to do for some videos that I am currently in the midst of editing. I'm trying to get a whole bunch of them backlogged and into the queue and ready to go. So I can continue working on the next series, which is going to be some package I don't want to say previews because I'm not the one that's actually creating the packages. Package showcase, I think, is what I'm calling it, showing off various packages for Sublime Text that perhaps might be more, the interesting things to show off to people. And probably won't be covering packages like Emmet and such. There's already a lot of videos on those. I'll be covering different videos, perhaps more geared towards package developers. But in any case, we'll see how that goes. I think we should be good to go here. Let's just check the final stats. So let us say hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. I lost my all right, sorry. Let's try that one more time. We're still 1 minute early. Hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. OdatNurd here. Of course, the self-proclaimed Sublime Text Fanatic. I even made a lower third to talk about that very thing. And welcome to tonight's live stream for July 2nd, 2019. This one was pushed a day. Normally we would do this on a Monday, but the 1st of July is a holiday here in Canada. It's the equivalent of the 4th of July in the States. And so we were busy celebrating and doing various non-computer related lounging activities. But here we are for tonight. And as the topic of the stream indicates, we are going to be attempting to work on, once again, browsing content. I think we covered this very briefly in the last stream, and there was some problems. And well, I think I've been giving it some thought. I think I know what it is that we want to do there with regards to that. So I think the first thing we should probably do is this. Welcome to the stream on live coding. Now, let's just go over sort of what we have been working on in previous streams. And one of those things is this create override command, which you'll recall allows us to, given the name of a package resource, attempt to open it and so that you can save it as an override, which is sort of an end run between doing something like view package file and choosing default add line before, which opens the file, but it's read only. And if you try to save the file, it goes into a random location that's not necessarily your the package location. And even after you save or save as the file, you still have to close it and reopen it before you can modify it, like so. I believe that worked because I happen to have a default package already ready to go. And the other thing we could do here is, of course, say package resource view or open resource, and then pick default and add line before. And it does the same thing. The file is ready to be edited. The cursor's at the bottom, and the inline diff is telling us that this entire content of the file has been added, like so. And the version of our command works a little bit differently. I believe we have to do something like window.run command create override, and you would need to pass it a file argument, and the file argument to pass it is packages default add line before dot sublime dash macro, like so, which does sort of what a split between the two. It's opened the file, the cursor is at the top, but it's editable, and the mini diff shows changes that were made since you created the file. So we can now navigate to our changes and use the internal diff to see what was changed instead of thinking that the change was the entire file. And that works quite well. I'm pretty happy with that. But of course, the problem is we have to run it by passing it the name of an actual resource, which is sort of a pain in the butt as these things go. But as it turns out, I was working on this other code quite some time ago, over a year or more, for being able to browse resources, excuse me, and it seems like the perfect fit for that very thing. Now, just to say, Package Resource Viewer is a great package. I highly recommend it for people that are using Sublime, even if you're not developers, because you often need to look at or tweak resources. But it does have um, a couple of issues I find. One of them is that there is a command for extract package in here, which is almost never what you want to do, because that will create an override for every single file in a package. And it's highly likely that you do that, you don't realize you did it. You say like, oh, I thought I picked open resource. Why did it not, show me the content of the package after I picked the package? Oh, well, I'll do it again. And now that entire package you picked is an override, and if you don't use override audit, you'll never know, and that's just a support nightmare down the line. Also, I'm not a huge fan of the way when you pick a file, you can push undo and the content of the file goes away. I don't particularly like that either per se. So that's why this particular version of the operation, you can't undo past this point. So it really is like opening a file. And what's even better is when you do this, you can close the file until you modify it. It's a scratch buffer, so you can actually remove it. So it's good for viewing package files as well. But that having to enter the package name like that when you execute the command, not the greatest user interface in the world. Now, Sublime does have the view package file command built in, and this is just showing every possible package resource by name. So if I want the contents of the user package, I have to do this to be able to see it, and then I can type key and I can see all of the key maps, but also there's those package dev items down there which have the text USER and the letters for key in here as well. So that is an unfortunate thing there. In this case, I really like the package resource viewer's ability to show you the list of packages and then show you the list of files in the package and then browse hierarchically through the folders. Now, I do know that if you're using view package file, sometimes if there's a lot of path and you want a particular .py, you don't know where it is. This is an easier way to find such a file, but there we have it. So we're going to go through this code here just to show what it's doing. And then there is a problem that we have with it, and there's I think also a to do in here if I remember when I looked at it earlier. Yeah, this line here, this to do comment is entirely aimed at basically the functionality that allows us to know that this sample.txt file isn't part of the package per se. It's not part of the shipped package, but it's still an unpacked file anyway. So it turns out, yeah, we actually need to handle that, but I think that should be pretty easy as well. So let's go over first. We're going to just work through this code just to see how it actually works. Now, there are a few classes in here that all sort of work together. And then there is this command down here that actually executes the thing. And actually, I think what we want for our own purposes here is user key Linux and swap the example command for the test command, I believe that was called. So we can actually see this sort of doing something. So I hit the key, and we're seeing here what would be, because we're not passing any arguments, all files, and we haven't given it a package. So it's showing us the list of all of the packages. And then when you pick it, a file, you get to see the contents, including folders. And you can go into folders, you can go out of folders. This should look pretty familiar because this is what Package Resource Viewer does as well. But whereas in Package Resource Viewer, when you pick it, it actually opens the file. In our version of the command, when you pick a thing, nothing happens, but the console says that we selected asp.sublime syntax from ASP. And how is this actually working? This is using this class from this particular file called package resource browser, giving it a package name and a file type, more on that in a second, and a lambda to trigger when the browsing is done, which is provided the package info for the package that was selected and the name of the resource, both of which being none if the user selection was canceled by the user. So we can even see that here. If I do this, we see selection was canceled by the user because I pushed escape and closed the panel. So this is using package resource browser. Now, if we look a little up here, package resource browser creates a package browser and a resource browser. And its browse method starts off collecting the list of packages if it needs to, or calling start browse, which, as we can see, if there's not a package name, browse for a package. If there is a package name, then pick a file from a package. And when that's all done, it does the on done item up here, which triggers stuff. Now, going even further down the rabbit hole, we have the resource browser, which provides the ability to browse for package resources given a package, and the package browser class, which just allows you to browse a package. So I think this probably be the easiest thing to demonstrate and show how this is working. So of course this is a class, right? So when you create it, you need to give it the window that the browse is going to happen in, because we do use the show quick panel method, which, as we can see, requires a window to be able to operate. And we pass it what kind of resource type we want to display. And that brings us to this very top item here in the file. What is a resource type? Basically, we're saying in Sublime, there are 3 different types of states that any package resource can be in. Realistically, yeah. The first one, as you can see here, is override. That means that the resource that you're specifying the name of is an override. That is to say, there is a packed version of the package and an unpacked version of the package, and that resource that you're using appears in both of those packages. So the unpacked one is the one that Sublime uses. That is an override. Non-override is the flip of that. And I imagine we could say, if we zoom this out, in the diff package, there's many files. As a matter of fact, we could probably even do this. In the diff package, there are many files in here, as we can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of files. Diff.py is an override. So this is an override file. These other ones, this one and these 3, are quote-unquote non-overrides. I'm not really sure what a good name for that is, but the idea is a file that exists in a package that doesn't have an override. And the third item is all, which is just all resources. Now, this resource type is used in a few places, and one of those is this code in the test command, which maps the text all to resource all, override to override, and this to non-override. So for our own purposes, we can see this is set to all by default, right? So when I hit this and I do Python, whoops, excuse me, go up one, diff is the one we were using, we can see all of the files that are in here, every single file. If I swap this to overrides, when I hit the thing and say diff, now the only file that appears is diff, because we know that is the file that is an override, right? And if we swatch this to non-overrides, when I do it and hit diff, now every file but diff.py appears. These are the files that aren't already overrides. Now, this was created to be the sum total of all browsing for items in Sublime here. And in particular, that is so that, if we wanted to do that create override, well, what you want to see there is a list of files that don't already have an override in place. Right? If you want to view files that aren't overrides, you want to view this list here. And if you just want to view resources in general, like view package file, then you want to pass all in there. And that's why all of those are there. We're going to leave that back at all for just now. So going back to here, package resource browser, when you create one, you provide it the window that it's going to display its quick panel in and the resource type. And it stores the window you provide or uses the active window if you didn't give it one, and it stores the file type. And of course, it does default to just all files, right? We can see the comment up there. Well, the browse can be filtered to show all packages or only those packages that contain at least one override. And because there's that non-override type, it's just treated as all. And all of these classes have a method named browse that actually kicks the whole thing off. So when you call browse, it calls get contents to grab the things that it should display in a list. It might log it. Here it's displaying it in the status line and in the in a dialog box as well. So if you try to browse a package that doesn't have any of the resources that you asked it for example, you told it you only wanted to view overrides, but there aren't any overrides, or you told it you wanted to view non-overrides, but there aren't any. Then it says there's no packages that contain resources of that type in the status line and as a dialog, and then it immediately finishes. And as you can see, it receives an on done, which is the code that it should invoke in order to tell you that an item was picked. And on done is also invoked when you display when an item is chosen from the quick panel, which gives you the index of the item in the list if index is greater than or equal to 0 or none. Now get contents up here, we can easily see if the resource type is override, then it calls the packages with overrides function from override audit, which returns only those packages that contain overrides. Otherwise, it just returns a list of every package. That means you typed non-overrides or you entered all, because that's why this says non-override is treated as all for the purposes of this class. It's got to do something for that. So all that's going to do is just come up with a list of package names and display them to you in the quick panel. And then when you pick one, the onDone is invoked with the name of the package you picked, or it's invoked with none if you canceled the browse. So that is also pretty simplistic. Now, if we look at resource browser, this is the same sort of operation, but, oh, and excuse me for just a moment. Excuse me. Oh, there might be another sneeze coming. We'll have to see what we do here. Whoops. Nope, I think we're okay. The resource browser does the opposite of what package resource does. You have to give it the name of a package, or in particular, a package info, I should say, and then it shows you the contents and allows you to choose one of those. So again, when you invoke it, you need to provide it a window and what sort of resources you want to look at. And of course, again, as before, it has a browse method that you use to kick it off. Here, when you call browse, you have to give it some arguments. The first is package info, which is a structure that is provided by one of the classes in Override Audit. It's a class that provides all of the information about a package, the name, the contents of the package, whether it's a shipped package, an installed package, what the package files are, all that stuff. You need to pass return to package, which is true or false, depending on whether or not you want the top item in the very top level of the browse to have the dot dot in it. So as we can see here, we're doing searching for packages, and when we pick a package, we're in the resource browser, and the very first item is dot dot for go back to packages. That's an example of calling this with return to package set to true. It means add that entry there. If you called this with return to package false, then once you enter in here, or if you just invoke it, you see these files, but you can't go back up a directory level. And of course, on done is the code that should get triggered when you actually select an item, which will be given the name of the item, or it'll be invoked with none if the operation was canceled by the user. Or as we can see here, if you tell it you want to browse overrides and there aren't any overrides in that package, then nothing happens. So if we trace this code up, the first thing we can see is get package content, which is up here. Now, this gets a version of the resources for the package whose name is provided, and we also cache them here in our instance of the class. And that's just because specifically for cases in uses like this, if you go into this class, the very first time you go in, it has to gather the list of all of the resources and how to display them. And if you go back out and go into a different package, it has to do that again here for the package control package. But if you went back to the package you were in originally, which I can't even remember what it was, you don't want to have to grab all those files again. So we cache them the first time and then just reuse them going on, which does presume the fact that while you have this open, you're not busy in a terminal somewhere adding files to a package, but we can only do so much. So if this isn't, the name of this package isn't in the cache, then do this. Otherwise, we can just return the content directly. Now, what do we see here? We see if this package has a package file, then it must be a shipped package. So the canonical content of this package is the contents of the Sublime package file. Otherwise, it doesn't have a package file. It must be an unpacked package. So use unpacked contents. And then the list of all resources is going to be just all of the contents if you said you wanted all things. Otherwise, we need to get the list of overrides for this package. And here we're passing simple equals true, which means we only want to know about the override files for unpacked files that override files in a packed folder, in a packed package file, which is a simple override. Remember, the difference between a simple override and a non-simple override would be, again, if we look over here, if this was SIU or SI, there's a shipped package and there's an installed package. That means that Sublime shipped with a Sublime package file, and then you also put an identically named package file in your installed packages folder. Sublime ignores the shipped version, uses yours. That's a quote-unquote complete override in override audit parlance, and that completely changes the basis of what overrides are based on. So we want to make sure we get these simple overrides. That's these ones here. And then if we're told we only want overrides, then the resource list is actually just the list of files that are overrides, right? Because that's what we're asked for. And otherwise, the resource list is the contents of the package, but not overrides. And that covers the case where it's resource type non-overrides. And it's done in this order because internally the package info class does cache the contents of packed contents and unpacked contents and override files, so that once you call it, that information is captured and stored for the next time you invoke it. And override files needs to basically call both of these. It needs to know, in order to figure out what an override is, it needs to know what files exist in the Sublime package, and it needs to know what files exist in the unpacked version of the thing so that it can subtract one from the other. So this is sort of the best way to, this primes the pump. One way or the other, we're going to need to call one of these in order to call this. So if the resource type is all, then we did just as much work as we needed to, and if resource type is any of the other ones, then we needed to have called one of those anyway. So it all still works out. And of course, we cache the data and return it, and we do this thing called explode files. But let's skip that for a minute and go back to where get package content returns. If there aren't any items, we say that there aren't any available items of that type, and then we immediately invoke on done with none. So anybody that invoked this class knows that the user isn't going to be able to choose an item. Um, and then the next thing after that is display panel, where we provide several options, and we can actually see that up on line 64. Items is the list of items to display. The prior text, it can be non-null, or can be null or empty. It's the text to display at the top of the list, like so. So you can make it anything you want. And then the last thing is a sort of a stack. And you'll note also that unlike the resource browser up here, where when you call browse, the show quick panel can immediately just invoke the on done that you used here. When we look at resource browser, and in particular, it's browse method down here, we actually have to save the on done. And that's due to that whole idea of, if we pick a folder, then the list has to redisplay showing us the contents of the folder. So we have to store that callback to be able to invoke it later on. We're seeing a lot of those messages in there. So we save that. We save whether or not we should be allowed to return to the package or not in our variable. And then we call display panel with this. And what does that do? It grabs some of the items from the items thing that was provided, and then if there's more than one, or we were told to return to packages, then insert the prior text as the very first item. So that doesn't appear if you told it not to go up a level. And as we'll see, this invokes itself potentially recursively, because we call show quick panel with the list of items, and the selection of an item invokes select item, where we say if an item was selected, then we might need to call display panel again, or we might not, depending on the state of items. Now, basically, we're going to say for right now that this captions text here is just a list of text. And as a matter of fact, that's exactly what it is. If we choose default, the items here, what we're seeing is a list of the names of all the folders, which in this case is sent to trash, plus all of the files that are in this item, which is all of the files in this item. Now that gets to be more if you go into, for example, the user package, now there's multiple directories here. So I can go into Git, and then I can go to Objects, and then I can go into O1 to see some files. So there are multiple layers to all of this stuff. So if you tell it to display the panel, and we're gonna ignore that stack for just a second. If we're at the top level, or if we're not at the top level, or we were told to also allow to return to the package, then we want to insert that prior text. Otherwise, do this. And when we call select item, what happens? Well, we know that the index is -1 if the user closes the panel. If that happens, none of this code executes, and we immediately invoke onDone with a value of none, right? Otherwise, what do we say? If the index of the item that was chosen is 0, i.e. the first item in the list, and there's more than one item in the quote-unquote stack, which we're going to cover in just a second, then we want to pop an item off the stack. That becomes the items, and then we invoke display panel again with the new items, but the same prior text and the now modified stack. Okay, now let's ignore that for just a second, because we can see that captions are the captions of all of the items in the list, and the index of the one that was chosen is the index of is the position in the list. So we know, for example, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2. So we get that text, and we also get to see if it has any children, and files don't have children, but folders do. The children are a new list of items that are the files and folders inside of that, right? So if the list of children isn't none, then what we do is we take the items that we were provided and stick them onto the end of the stack, which is actually just an array. So it starts out empty. Remember down here, the stack starts out empty. The very first directory you hit you gets to the part where it says children is not none. So it takes all of the list of items that currently are displayed and sticks them into an array that sticks them as the last entry on the array. So an empty array becomes an array with one thing. And then we call self display panel again using the children of the current item, that is the contents of the folder that we just picked, as the items to display, and we still pass the prior text that we were originally provided, and that stack array, which was empty originally on the very first call, but now has the items that we were just displaying. And that's why if the index is 0 and the length of the stack is greater than 0, then what that means is you have done something where you've gone into a directory, and then the first item picked is item 0 dot dot. There's currently one item on the stack, so the length of the stack is 1, which is greater than 0, and the index is 0, which means what it does is it pops the item that it appended down here as the list of items to display, and then invokes display panel with it, which is why we get to see the same items that we just saw a second ago before we went into send to trash. And in the top level, when you pick that particular item, you'll end up going back to where you started. And because in this case stack is 0, that would actually cause onDone to be selected with a value of 0, and it's up to the caller of this to determine that because they said return to package true, that the very first item was dot dot, that means that they should take special action. Otherwise, it's the name of a resource. Now, the part of this that is really the magic of this whole thing, and the thing that I spent the longest time struggling over coming up with, is this code here in handle file, which I'm pretty sure we did talk about in a previous thing, because I think I was using it as the basis of some other code. Could be wrong on that, I'm not sure, but I think that that was the case. Now, as we can see here, it says explode a list of files that represent package file contents into a dictionary which describes the logical path layout. The dictionary has keys that indicate the files and folders stored at this level, with each folder also being represented as a key. And I think perhaps the best way to show you what this is to do something like from JSON import dumps or dump s and print dumps retval and indent equals 2, let's say, like so. And then what we're going to do is clear the console, and Let's pick a package that is small, which I think might be Bob. We'll see what this does. We can see this entry has one thing. The list of files that exist in this package is just preferences.sublime settings, and the list of folders is nothing. So Bob contains only one item, right? And I canceled it. Let's clear the console again. Now let's pick a slightly more complicated item, and I think for that we maybe want that default package. It's going to have a lot of stuff in it. I'm going to cancel that out. We can zoom this up for just a second to see all of the stuff. So what we see here is there is a folder in this named Send to Trash, and that folder contains these 4 files, and it contains no other folders. Also, within the top level of the package, this is a list of all of the files that appear, which is a lot. And here's a list of all the folders, which is sent to trash. Now, this is safe because we ensure that when we create this dictionary, files is always the string files, and folders is always the string folders. All other keys are actual folder names. They always have a trailing path / on them. And for the purposes of actually seeing even more of this, and the only package I can think of that has lots of stuff in it is my user package. So we're going to do that. We can see there is a lot of stuff here, but this is basically what you might consider a recursive structure. I didn't even go all the way far enough back to be able to get to the top of this dang thing. Zoop. There we go. The list of folders in the top level of my user package are these: Git, package control cache, terminus, help, macros, SFTP servers, and snippets. Then the contents of SFTP server is these files, no folders. Git, the Git folder contains these folders. And then also the logs folder contains a file and a folder named refs. And the refs folder contains a folder named folders, no files. But these 2 folders, heads and remotes, here's the contents of heads, which contains files but no folders, and hooks, and so on, and so on, and so on. So this is constructing a dictionary which for each level in the hierarchy contains the names of all the files, the names of all the folders, and the information to know what's inside of subfolders. And we can see the files and folders things here so that we don't have to hard code these strings to make this code easier to read. And remember, when we go down to resource browser here, oh, sorry, that's package resource browser. I went too far. When we do get package contents, code we are actually already looking at, we get from the package file a list of the package files. We get the list of overrides. We figure out the actual information for resources. Then we call that explode files and store the result. And when we actually use it, when it comes time to display the panel, we say the items that we got, give me the value of the folders key first. That's going to give me the list of all the folders that appear in this level of the package, if any, and then all of the files, if any. And if there isn't anything in the list, then the panel doesn't open. So this explode files here. As you see, the original return value says files, empty list, folders, empty list. Assume that their package exists but is empty. And then we do this. I think this might be the code that I scooped out for other code. It sorts the list of files, which is the thing we were given and is basically a list that looks like this. Except it doesn't have the package name on it because that part's already known. It sorts them first by directory name, then by file name, so that all the folders come to the top of the pile. And then it calls handle file on each one. And what it does there is split it by the forward path separator, because in Sublime packages, regardless of platform, forward slashes or the POSIX path or Linux path specification is how they're always done, even on Windows. If there's only one part, then it's the name of a file, so add it to the list of files in this branch and we can leave. Otherwise, the subdirectory is the first part, the remaining path is everything that comes after, and then we need to see if that subfolder appears in our folders list and add it if it doesn't. Otherwise, create a new entry for that subfolder, and then for the remaining path, um, oh, sorry, I guess we should say here that what this is doing is this splits it by path separators. The subdir is the name of the first item plus a trailing slash. That's why they appeared the way they did here with that slash on the end to make sure that they're paths. And then this is every other part of the path. The one here means we only want to perform this split once. So if that subdirectory isn't in the list isn't in this thing as a key, then we want to add it in there. And the first thing we need to do is say this branch's folders contains this subdirectory, and then add a new key for the actual subdirectory that contains no files and no folders, and then call this function recursively with the part of the path that's left to handle it inside that subdirectory. So, a resource like, again, we go back to here, default add line before. The first split happens, and then it adds add line before. That's probably a bad one for that. The user package is probably a better one to use this for, because when you get into those complicated paths, oh, like this, it sees user/git, right? So .git goes first, and then it calls it with packed refs second. Or here in this case, the first top level directory is package control.cache, and the remaining path is this long folder, and it goes inside there and grabs the files and so on. This is sort of a small, succinct way to take a list of files that looks like this and turn it into that hierarchical structure. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that and put this back to the way that it was. And the last thing to look at here is package resource browser, which really ties these two things together. You could use package browser if you just wanted to prompt the user for a list of packages to select from, and you could use resource browser if you already knew the package and you wanted to get the user to pick a file, and you can specify that file type filter to determine what files that you should display. But package resource browser ties both of those together. So you create it with potentially the name of a package if you're interested in browsing a specific package, or you could leave that off and it asks you for a package. You have to provide it a window for the same reason you have to provide the other ones, because it's going to call those other classes. You need to specify a file type, which has a sensible default. We need to provide it a list of packages for it to display for you to choose. You can pass none if you don't already have a package list, and it'll gather it for you. And then there is an on done in here whose job it is to uh, get invoked when all of this stuff happens. And we can see a lot of this stuff is just saving the values that were provided. Here's a cache that we create that's just empty, and we create our own package browser and resource browser from those other two classes, giving them the window and the file type that we were given, or I guess in this case, the window we inferred if we were given no window. And like in the other ones, you're going to invoke this with browse. So there's two ways this can go. If you gave it a list of packages when it was created, if you said, like down here, package resource browser, package list equals some list of packages, it will just immediately call start browse with a value of none, which is what actually starts things happening. Otherwise, it uses the package list collection thread, which again is something that is in override audit, whose job it is to scan for and find all of the packages. And once it gathers all of them, which includes figuring out what overrides are, because if we're going to need to know that information for later, um, it fires that thread up and says that start browse is where the thread, what should be invoked once the package thread has finished collecting all of the files. Okay, it's sort of like the callback. And that is also start browse just like here. So if we were given an item, then we got it from the thread. So set the package list to that. Otherwise, we don't need to do that because it was already created. So if package list self package list was not none, then we invoked it with none. None, this doesn't happen. Otherwise, the thread invokes it. We ask the thread. Now, if the package name is none, then we have to ask the package browser to browse for a package, and we give it the list of packages that we have to choose from. And we also specify that we want to invoke package select once a package is picked from the list. Um, Otherwise, we must have a package. So if it's in the list of packages that we know about, then we call package select with the name of the package. So if we look first at using package browser browse, that's using the package browser class we just looked at. It's the one at the very top of the file. Package select is what's invoked when you pick an item. Now, remember, you notice here we are passing true to this value for package select to indicate that when we use sorry, this is invoked with the name of the package that was picked. So if the package name isn't none, then we know that the user has selected a package. That's the analog of picking default here. Then we use our resource browser, give it the name of the package that we told it to show the contents of, sorry, the actual package info for the package that we want to display the contents of, and pass that value, which is true here, to say allow the user to pick the top item in the list to come back to select a new package if they want to. And the callback is resource select when you actually pick a resource. And we can see here that if the file name that you get is ... that must mean that you hit the top level. So immediately call start browse again with thread is none. That reuses the package list we already had, and it just asks you for a package again. Otherwise, its package info is the name of the contents of the package. It asks the package list for the information on the package name that you picked, and then calls on done to tell you the information, the file that you picked, and the package info, which is what we can see in the console. When I do this, we see it say selected init.py from default. That's our code telling it that information. If you instead called this with an actual package name and that package was in the list, then it calls package select with that name directly, sort of like it does here, but it passes false instead of true. And that would mean that when you invoked the command, you didn't say package none, you said package default, in which case this list opens and you don't have to go up. And as a matter of fact, we can even show that here. If I change this to default like this, when I run the command, we just immediately see the contents of the default package, and we can't go back up to choose a package because we never chose a package. We were told exactly what package to pick. That's what that thing is doing there. And here, of course, the on done is saying, if there was something actually picked, if we were actually given an on done, then invoke it and give it the information on the package and the resource name. And this is being used down in this class. We say we want to use the package we were provided, which defaults to none, but we just saw we can change that. File type comes from this mapping that maps all overrides and non-overrides to these items, and it gets it out. And assuming if you pass an invalid file type, it just assumes that all because that key won't appear in the dictionary. And when it's done, it should call selected file with the package in the file, which is why it's saying either selection was canceled by the user or selected the package from the file. Now this works really good. And that was actually 45 minutes worth of stuff there, but it's good to know exactly how this code actually works because it's going to be quite instrumental, I think, in probably a lot of features. The downside, of course, to all of this being that the command palette now has the ability to do this. So maybe this should be implemented using this instead, but that's a little more fraught. We can only do so much. There is a problem with this, though, and we can see it here. Selected init.py from default. Note, I pick default, I pick send to trash, I pick init.py. It's telling me init.py from default because that's the item I picked, but it's actually inside that send to trash folder. So I'm not getting a full package resource name here. I'm only getting that one. But I think I know how we could fix something like that. Now, if we go back to see how well this works, the package resource browser, sorry, the resource browser is the one that actually browses the contents of the package, right? And it calls this explode files, which we covered, which gives you that dictionary that says this is the files in this directory, here's the folders in this directory, and then we also want to know there's also the keys that say what the children of this are, the contents of the actual folder, so that when you pick one, it knows what to display. We could do something like add a new item here called, let's call it current, like so. And we're going to modify the stack here. So we might say something like, in addition to the above, while browsing package content, this key is added to stack entries to indicate what the current item is at the stack entry chosen. Maybe that may or may not be an interesting comment, but what we want is in this thing here. What do we want to do? This goes back up if you pick an item. This is getting the selected item by caption, or by index. So that is like saying getting, in this case, add line before its index is 2. Captions is the list of all things in the panel. And then look for children by seeing if the item that we chose, like say if we pick send to trash in this case, then the dictionary that's displaying this, the items dictionary, has a key named send to trash whose contents is all of the files and folders in there, right? The default is none. If it's not none, then you've actually picked a directory. So that's where we take the current items that we're displaying right now and stick them onto the end of that stack list, and then use the list of children as the items to display. And if the user picks the very first item in the list of items to display is taken by removing the last item off of the stack and then redisplaying. So I think, based on the thing we just did, we could say item, oh, I cannot type. What's new there? Self.current is equal to selected, right? Yeah, and then stick it in. That works, right? So every time we're about to put an item on the list, we take the item that was selected and insert it in as that. Probably that could be injected in the bit where we explode files. But seems that this code is pretty tight, and so I kind of like the idea of just adding it here instead, because then that other code can be pulled out. I guess so. That would sort of, as we're going into the stack, as we're going into children, we store the name of the item that was picked before we add that item to the stack and go in. If you pick the item in the top, it pops it and displays. But if you actually pick the name of a file, then how would we get the actual path of the items here? We'd all the stack is a list of items, and it's like a top-down thing. So we would probably say like entry for entry in reversed stack, because the stack, we should iterate the stack back to front to get the folders in the correct order. And then actually, I guess this would probably be self.current. So we get a list of, starting at the end of the stack and coming towards the front, grab the current entry for every item, and you end up with a list. And you can say like the resource you picked is that. And then, oh, you want to stick on the selected item, which is the actual name of the file. And in that case, this wouldn't be this. It would be something like join that. Do we want to do this? Oh, no, we don't want to do that, because we already know that the folders in here, which is the items that have children, always have that slash on the end. So we don't need to do that here. We just need to do that, I think. Let's test that out and then see what we get. We pick default and something in the top. We get the same thing we got before. If we pick default, send to trash init, we get send to trash init from default, so that's good. If I picked the user package and then the git package and then the objects directory and then 00 and then this, we get 00 objects git. So that is backwards. So we actually, I guess, don't want to reverse this as much as I thought we did. Oh yeah, I was thinking of popping the items off. Let's try that again. User git objects 0 something, git objects 0 something. There we go. That's a nice, so now we have the whole path. That solves that problem quite nicely. Hang on a second here. Are there any other issues with this? If we wanted to use it for this create override command, it assumes it has packages slash on the front, which we need to strip off. We don't have packages in here. We also don't have the name of the package. This requires the name of the package to be able to fiddle this thing around. Now we could modify that. We could take a package and a resource argument here and get all of that working. We could also modify maybe the package resource browser class here. That's this one, right? Yeah. So that when it invokes the on No, wait a minute. Oh, sorry. This is the package resource browser. That's the resource browser. That's right. This is package resource browser is the one where we do something like so to actually provide the full thing that we're seeing in the console down here, where we see selected this from the package user. Maybe it makes sense to return, in this case, the actual full resource, sort of like that. Default add line before is the thing. And I think we could say something like resource name is equal to something like, if we want to be cheap about it, and then oops, package info. No, that's just a field name like so, and resource name like so. Oh, but if we want to say if package info is not none, I think, because if you pushed escape, you don't want that to blow up. So if we did that, default add line before returns default add line before from default. That's nice. And send to trash that. So that, I mean, the same thing could add the packages slash thing on here if we wanted to. Maybe that makes sense for the purposes of this command, because it could prompt you for the arguments it doesn't have, or just do it. Let's leave, that part's easy enough to replicate. Let's remove that one for the time being. So we go back to, if we do that, we see the resource and we get the package. So the resource name is and the package name, which is how everything else in override audit works in this particular case. So I think that's the best way to go. Oh, there is one other thing we need to worry about here, and that's stuff like this. I don't think sample.txt doesn't appear anywhere in here because it's not anything interesting. So there's that to-do item that we were talking about previously. What's the best way to handle that? Imagine it should be configurable, so you could say yes or no, because you might want to turn that stuff on or off. So that means whatever we do, we want to do in the resource browser. Let's say unknown equals true, let's say, as an argument, and we can say self.unknown equals unknown. The idea being, when you create the resource browser, you ask it, should it display unknown items or not? Yeah. And we'll default it right now for true. We can always swap that later. And when we call get package contents, this is the part where we say the base content is either the contents of the package or the unpacked. If all, then the resource list is just the entire package. Otherwise, it's either overrides or contents of the file minus overrides. So this gives you just this gives you everything. This gives you just overrides, and this gives you everything that's not an override by taking everything and removing overrides. So here we could say if self.unknown something, and and for that I think we need to load override report. what's this unknown files? How do we grab that business? Package info dot unknown override files. Okay. So we might say res list is package info dot that. I think Boolean or is the way to do that. So that defaults to true. So I think if we do this, yeah, there's the sample and that works. So that's easy enough to do for that in the resource browser. I also want to add a comment here that says the value of the unknown argument indicates if package files whose status is unknown should appear in the list or not. An unknown file is one which appears in the unpacked content of the package but doesn't correspond to a packed file. Okay, and where we create a resource browser is here. So I think here we also want to add an unknown equals true, like so. And when we call the resource browser, we say unknown there. I don't think we need to save the value of that because the resource browser is the only thing that uses it. We could save it. Easy enough to add that later if we care. So I think that means that this should still just work. I need to go to make file and see sample. And if we said unknown equals false before we did that, and we go into make file, sample no longer exists. So that's perfect. Now the thing becomes, oh, and we need to find that to do, remove that. Include files of unknown status if asked, if required. The thing becomes, should the unknown files in any way interrelate to whether you asked for overrides or not overrides or all files? And my gut instinct is no, it should just always be there because by definition, we don't know that it's supposed to be an override because it's a file that appears in the unpacked version of the package, but not in the packed version, which means it's not an override. It's actually, I guess, augment might be a better name for this and not unknown. But so I think this works just the way we want, just like so, as a matter of fact. So I think that means that the package resource browser class is doing what we want. And what we need to do then is first modify OA create override for our proof of concept to take the name of a package and the name of a resource. And then create it from that. Might be the way to go. What are we at? We're at an hour here. I think I could go a little more here. And let's see. We would want it to say, well, what did this one call? Package info. Well, we actually wanted, sorry, package and, oh, what is a diff single? Whoops. Diff single. What does its run or method take? Package and override. Well, it's not really an override if you're creating it. So I guess package and files probably like so. Let's remove, this needs to also have package and file. We're not going to have that though, so maybe we don't want that at all. We'll just comment that out for the time being. So the command just always works. So we're going to need to do a little bit more work here. Because if we're getting the name of a package and we're getting the name of a file. As a matter of fact, let us, what's this thing called again? Oh, that's the event lister. Create override command. VPF user default Linux key map. We want to change this to create override like so. Now I think that's going to immediately cause a problem because we don't have any arguments. So package, well, I don't know. Right, that key is broken now, isn't it? Default. And the file is, oh, actually, I should probably do this for a thing that I don't already know exists. Yeah, okay. Add line before dot sublime macro. So, whoop, unable to open packages before dot sublime macro. Okay, well, that is clearly broken. But the code is, doing dumb stuff. So let's go ahead and print package and file and return it just to verify that we are getting default and add line before dot sublime macro. Okay, good. So with that in play, and we can close that for the time being, we don't need to strip the packages prefix off of the file that we were provided because it doesn't exist there already. But the name of the unpacked file is the packages path, then package, then file. And we need to, no, I guess we shouldn't have closed that thing after all, huh? That's going to do the wrong thing? Yeah, that's what I thought. VPF user default Linux key map. Let's comment that for just a second and say paste from history.py. So when we hit the key, this is a file that already exists, so it's hitting that short circuit case here. Let's make the console smaller so we can still view output, but see code too. That's this one here. We would say it lives. Even the debug code has to be perfect, guys. Okay, so we hit the key and it lives because that file already exists. So that is doing what we want. Switch that back in case we want to go back here. We can close diff single because we don't care about that. So now we know that's happening. We can delete that and then say print it shall live instead, which is what it's doing when it says that, but it's still not doing the correct thing. And that's because the resource to open is the string packages. It also needs to contain the name of the package followed by the file to open. There we go. And then we get back into that stuff that worked before. Perfecto, except for the part where I quit Sublime when I didn't mean to. Oh yeah, that was another thing I wanted to. I can't remember if we tested this. I'm gonna say close. No. Keep in mind, this currently is not an override, so it couldn't open that file. It did its magic. If I quit and restart, it is gone. Well, there's only so much we can do about that. Sublime deletes transient views. I mean, we could modify it to keep it, and then when you start Sublime, it comes back. But that is all that. So that appears to be working quite nice. So now, here's where we get to do maybe some magic here. That's in my home directory, right? So we want package resource browser, right? Yeah. From .oa test browse import package resource browser. Seems to work. And we want to create one of these things. We're going to go like what? Seems like a perfect opportunity to have this thing split, doesn't it? So let's do let's do that so we can see both of these at the same time. This is create override. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say package equals none, file equals none. Now, if package is none or file is none, then we need to create a package resource browser, right? Package resource browser, and we want to give it the package name, which is package self.window. The resource type all? No, we want resource type dot non-override. So we need to import also resource type like so. And then we want to come back to package resource browser and its init method. We're not going to pass it a list of packages. Unknown. Well, I guess this is an example of unknown being true, right? We want to, I guess, also say unknown equals false. In this case, we don't want to see files that aren't overrides because we specifically only want to see overrides, which maybe is a case for making package resource viewer not do this when you say override. But you know, this gives us the ability to turn that on or off as we choose, because maybe we want to do that in the future. I don't know. And we need an on done, which is going to take, I forget how it works. Oh yeah, I guess that's down here, isn't it? P comma R. Oops. We want on done equals lambda PR, like so. Self.window.run command. I'm going to drop this down. Create override, and we're going to say the package name is p dot browse and return. Oh wait, why does that not work? we're doing it this way. Return unknown like so, and then this part doesn't have to be here. So let's see what happens. That's working, right? So I pick it. It automatically goes because we gave it arguments. So if I did give it a file argument, then it's just browsing the default package for all files that aren't overrides. So paste from history doesn't appear in here, and I could pick context.sublime menu, and there it is. So that's good. If you did pass it a file, well, I mean, I guess it's gonna prompt you for a package first, and then it's still, oh, excuse me, apologies for that. It's still gonna do this. I think that makes sense. Because it seems weird that you would provide the name of a file without also knowing the name of the package. Uh, the code could be smarter in this case. It could say if package is none, then it can just use a package browser to choose the package. And then if there's not a resource, it can use package resource browser to browse the package. Otherwise, it does both of them. So that's something that could be done if we want to. But now we can clean this up by doing this. And now we have the opportunity to immediately create overrides. And we could create an override in test package if it had any content, which it doesn't. Oh, we're getting some action here. Why did that happen? Oh, because of that. Oh, that's good, good, good. Okay. So let's. I see. Now, destroy current pane. Yeah, that's one that's key binding. I don't use as often as the one that creates stuff. So what we might want is pick self package info resource. If package info is not none, then self.window.run command create override package info.name and file resource like so. And here's the part where we might go ahead and do that. Say, oh, whoops, this one's not supposed to be here. If we're going to do that, guys, we might as well do that, right? Then this says the lambda is self.pick. All that part goes away. We're not running command anymore. Just noticing that the stream quality, while it says is very healthy and it's still uploading, seems very fuzzy in my live preview. So hopefully that is just temporary. We are about to call the stream. I do record these as well. So if you're watching this live and it's looking awful, then I will delete the archive that it creates and just upload the recording manually instead. Lambda.pr would be self.pick pr.browse like so. Now that allows us to jump that up like that. So I think that's going to fix that problem. So I can still escape if I want. And I can create an override on the ASP Sublime syntax. This is not a real file, but ASP. And as soon as I make a change, I am immediately tracking it for diff purposes, and I can skip around. That is, I think, fairly fantastic. That's a good spot to call this stream. We've done a lot of stuff. Now, this is something that I think is going to be, if I can clean this up a little bit more, we're going to have to move the code from the file that I just closed that I didn't mean to. How far back do I have to go? That far, huh? Shoot. Well, I guess we could do VA OA test browse. Or did it go to another frame? Oh, that's why it did that. It jumped it over there. Boop. Okay. This code here will have to be added to package control. And this also could be a little smarter. If package is none and file is not none, then it has to do something different than this. It can, and then again, in that case, it could just do package resource browser with the name of a specific package. I guess something else I should point out here is package list collection thread. The name list is the name of packages to grab the contents and to scan for. If you pass none, it finds all packages. You can also pass a single package to have it only collect information on that one package, or you can provide it a list of packages. So basically this is it saying if the actually were given a package name of none, it would find all of the packages. But if you were given a package name, then go ahead and do find just that one. So probably given that, let's zoom that again. We could do something like save self.file here. Actually, we want to use package browser, wouldn't we? Yeah, sorry, I was doing that in the opposite direction. Package browser needs a list of all of the packages to allow you to pick one. So we still would need to grab a list of packages. Maybe we want to do something to package resource browser that has a resource equals none. And when it gets to the part where it would prompt you, when it gets to this part, if package name is none, browse for package. Otherwise, do package select. It could say if the package name is in self package list, if there's a file name already provided. Maybe we try that. Maybe we actually take this out to a full-on stream. I'm just going to test something here. I'm going to type something in here and okay. The live stream that's not in the dashboard looks like it's working just fine. So let's not worry about that overly much. So we're going to go ahead and close that tab. Okay, you know what? Let's make those changes and see what we come up with. What all is creating a package resource browser? That is, and this is, right? If we went to the definition of this, package name is none. Resource equals none. Window, file type, package list, unknown, on done, like so. Self.resource equals resource, like so. Now, everywhere that's calling this needs to be smarter about it. We need sorry, that is not what is creating package resource browser. This is what's creating it. And we're specifically saying the package name is that, the file name is that, and that is that. So I think for our purposes, maybe we should go ahead and swap this back to test just so we can see what it's doing. It's allowing us to choose stuff, good. If we added args, we could say package is default. So when we do it, it just shows us the name of a package and lets us pick, and then it's done. And if we said resource, is that what I called that? Oh, I called it file there, didn't I? In that command. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't take that argument at all, but it needs to. File equals none. So this can say, resource equals file, like that. Now, if I do this, unexpected keyword argument resource. Oh, yeah, right, because I just called it file a second ago. Default and, okay, so that's still doing that, but theoretically it has that resource now. So we would say in the package resource browser, when we're calling browse, it's going to grab that. It's going to come up here. If package name is none, then do package browser. And the result of that is calling package select. And then if package name is in the list, call package select, which is the same as calling that. So here we can say if self.resource is not none, then return self.onDone. And what we would normally invoke is res select, which provides the package info, which is going to be the package list for package name, like it is there. And then we need to pass it the name of the file, which is self.resource. So I think that means in the key binding, we're saying, oh, actually the file shouldn't be default. Well, we can give it a, we haven't given it a package, we've given it a file. So if I pick ASP, we get selected default from ASP, which is what we might have expected. And if we actually said add line before dot sublime macro, like so, when you do it, whatever package you pick, that's what you get. And if you pick default, that maybe actually works. Now again, if we say package and that, and we comment this one out, then we get to choose add line before .sublime macro or any other file we want, but we're not allowed to pick the package. And if we provide them both, then it just immediately says that we picked add line before from default, which is exactly what we want it to do. I think that means if this was create override like so, then this is still package and file like that. And when we create a package resource browser, now we got to be careful. The first argument is the package name. The second argument is the resource. So the second argument is file. Then we get the window and the file type. And we don't want to pass a package list, but we do want unknown. So we could actually just say none, comma, false, and then make this a little clearer. But I kind of like that. So now Super T does create override. So if I do this, then it should show me get me to pick a package. Oh, actually, if I do this, it should then prompt me for a package and a file. So I have to pick a package. I have to pick a file, add line before. There it goes. If I provide a package name, then I automatically get prompted and I can pick whatever I want, like add line before, and it works. I can remove the package and add the file, which means when I do it, it's asking me for a package, and as soon as I pick it, it does it. But that also means if I pick the wrong package, it does nothing because that doesn't actually exist. There's nothing we can do about that per se, short of actually looking to see if that resource is in the list of resources. So that's something we could augment this with. And if they're both in there, it just does it directly. So if I did this, this is always going to be that, right? So maybe one last thing we can do here. Okay, so prompt. If one of those is missing, if an unpacked file already exists. Okay, let's comment this. If a package or file name is missing, or reinvoke ourselves. Open it manually. Open the name as a resource. We don't need convert this to a pack. Okay, we can actually just do that, don't we? Convert the file name to a package resource and open it. What we might actually want to do is a test here, because this says if there's a file in the packages path in the package folder with the resource name we were provided and it exists, then go ahead and just open that file. We could actually say, now if I did sublime.find resources, like so, you find everything, and we see that it has, if we get out of the cache directory and my stupid user package, packages user. So it has the text packages in front of it. So we might have to say something like resource equals, actually we don't even, oh, this is we don't want to use os.path.join here because that won't work. Shoot. That's a good catch. This will only work under Linux. This will not work on Windows. I should say, because on Windows the path separator goes the other direction, and os.path.join uses the appropriate system path separator. So this should actually be a list of things. But we could say the resource is packages, and then package, and then file, and we might say that dot join this. Convert to a package resource. If resource not in, oh, actually, whoops, save that. If I put that code in here, dot join packages, and let's say default, and add line before Sublime macro, we end up with, oh, whoops. Yeah, that should maybe actually be the smart thing, like so. Still no? Oh, whoops, because I did that. I'm doing too much JavaScript programming earlier. Oh, whoops, we don't want that there. We want that to look like that. So packages, package find. I did it right there. Sublime.find resources. This is nothing. Oh, right. Hmm. Right. Okay, that would take a little bit more work. The idea there was to see if this resource exists as an actual resource and display a message if it's not, instead of doing the thing it's currently doing, which is just opening a file that has no content in it. Um, there's not really a good way to determine that, though. But what we could do is swap this to dollar packages like that. Then we can remove that and remove that and a couple of those things. And then if this key map actually said default, so if it worked, that still works, and it'll also work under Windows too. I mean, I'll test that, but that makes that a little nicer. Sublime.find resources, I'm pretty sure. Whoops, what did I do? There we go. Oops. That's the one I'm looking for. We want to do, no, find resources, I think. Name matches the given pattern. So that works. That doesn't. That doesn't, but this does. And this, I typed it wrong. So in order to test if this resource actually exists, we need to be able to grab the last path component of the resource provided. So we might say, if not, oh wait, can you say not in? Probably, right? If file not in sublime dot find resources file dot split on that the last item, then log. Is log something that's in here? No, it's not. It's just printfing stuff, isn't it? It's printing, yeah. Print, this resource does not exist in this package, and return that. So this should still work. Oh wait, did I break it? Default and add line before. Okay, let's say, oh, what's file here? File is just add line before as an argument. So yeah, of course it's not in there because find resources comes up with the actual resource name, doesn't it? So we would need to say resource is equal to that dot join the list of packages and package and file like before, and then say if resource, oh, let's do that. That's still good. Convert the file name to a resource, see if it exists in that package or not. So we take the text packages and the name of the package we were given and the resource that we were given. And if that resource isn't in all of the resources returned by splitting the resource name on the forward path separator and picking the last one, then you say this resource doesn't exist and return. Otherwise, we do this. which is an unfortunate duplication of effort, but it means that that works and opens the file. But changing this to ASP says this resource does not exist in the package the way we want it to, which is perfect. And if we take that back to default, the only thing that might make this nicer is replacing the text packages at the beginning with that. Um, but I don't know, there might be a better way to determine this. This does need a little bit of cleanup, so I think we're going to call that good for this and for the stream, which has gone pretty close to the 2 hours that we normally do. But we actually got stuff done here. We have the implementation of a browser that does what we want, and we can actually create an override now. And we could also extend this to view resource and do the same thing with instead of create override command, a view resource command that can do the same sort of stuff. As a matter of fact, we could just call we could just do this one here to open the file and then always make sure that it's read only. So even if it's actually a thing, you're quote unquote viewing it. And maybe we want an open resource for the same thing, only for files that actually exist in the folder. That might make a good set of stuff. That might actually mean that this goes to the next point release. But in any case, we got a lot of stuff done here. If you have been, thank you for watching. And if you have any questions on any of the stuff we did here, or on any of the videos on this channel or my other channel where I release every Monday at 9 a.m. PST, a new Sublime Text video, you can drop those down in the comment section below or hit me on Twitter at OdatNurd. And you can also send video suggestions for things you'd like me to cover in live streams or in actual videos there as well. But until the next live stream next week, or until we meet again on the upcoming Monday when the next video drops, this is OdatNurd asking you to please have a sublime day.